Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We welcome to all participants and attendees in our online class with Dr. Khalid Zaheer. I am your host, Maratib Ali Shad from UK, and we really apologize for starting late because of some misunderstanding and technical issue. We actually follow British Standard Time, and now it's 9:26 our local. So people who come online and join us from other part of the world, so they need to follow the British Standard Time. Might be there is some misunderstanding. Anyway, uh, thank you. Very welcome to all. Uh, we will discuss, uh, conduct the whole session in three segments, actually four segments. First three segment will be of 10 minutes. First segment will be related to Quran. Um, Today we will discuss and try to understand Surah At-Tawbah, chapter 9, verse 102 and 103. And then next 10 minutes we will uh, doing our advanced learning, a regular, a continuous session from the previous one. The topic is believe in God, and we have already circulated its notes as well in email. And the third segment, which Dr. Saab will be uh, discussing, it is about, I think the topic was, sorry, um, um, sorry about that, I'm just checking. Yeah, the third segment, Dr. Saab will discuss what methodology of the rule is to be followed in Islamic State. Obviously, that's a very vast topic, but he will try to brief very quickly. And fourth segment, which will last 30 minutes, that will only question answer. So obviously, that is going to be a intense session because a lot of knowledge we are going to be grasped, and we will try to understand and ask the question accordingly. So I request Dr. Khalid Zaheer to start the session, and and then uh, we, we will be live in a two-way in a question answer after 30 minutes. Dr. Sir, please take the charge of the session. Jazakallah.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Can you
Yes,
hear me?
yes, yes. I can hear you. Yes.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Surah At-Tawbah, verses 102 and 103. Surah number 9. وَآخَرُونَ اعْتَرَفُوا بِذُنُوبِهِمْ. And there are others who accept their misdeeds. خَلَطُوا عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَآخَرَ سَيِّئًا. They are ones who mix good deeds with bad ones. عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَتُوبَ عَلَيْهِمْ. It is hoped, it is likely that God is going to turn towards them. Inna Allaha Ghafur Rahim. Indeed, God is forgiving, merciful. Surah Tawbah is the surah which mentions the Almighty's punishment on the people who received God's message from His messenger directly and yet went on to reject it. God's policy, Sunnah, has always been that when He would send a Rasul, a messenger, to a nation to which the messenger would also belong. And despite the fact that the message would be delivered most clearly, most convincingly, if the immediate addressees of the messengers would reject the message, they shall be punished in this worldly life first and then in the next life later. For this incident of God's punishment getting inflicted on a nation, for this episode, incident, to become a reason for learning a lesson, ibarah, for the rest of the mankind. The last of the messengers, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may God be mercy be on, God's mercy be on him. His nation met with the punishment through the swords, military might of his companions. Surah Tawbah, the ninth chapter, describes that punishment. That is why I mentioned it before as well. This is the only surah of the Quran that doesn't begin with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, because in this beginning statement, verse of the Quran, there is a mention of God being merciful and kind. So, because the message of the surah is not consistent with the basic message that the verse is conveying, therefore, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim was omitted in the beginning of this surah. This surah talks about God's punishment on three categories of people, three groups of kuffar, those who rejected the messenger, knowing quite clearly that he's from God. One of them were the polytheists, al-mushrikun. The other were the people of the book, Ahlul Kitab. And the third were the hypocrites, al-munafiqun. Uh, the first 28 verses of the surah deal with the first group, the polytheists. The next 5, 6 verses deal with the people of the book. The rest of the longish passage of the rest of the surah is talking about the hypocrites. The hypocrites were a part of the Muslim community. They claimed that they are Muslims, but they were in actual fact not Muslims at heart. So the Almighty in this surah required believers to go through different trials, different phases of their commitment to the faith. Uh, they were given to face different situations so that true believers and hypocrites are clearly distinguished from each other. Now, the trouble was, the difficulty was that weak believers and hypocrites were very difficult to distinguish from each other because both were doing things wrong. Both were committing sins. Both had a problem in their commitment with faith. So the Almighty has required believers in this surah, more particularly those who were weak in their commitment, to improve their performance, to be more clear, firm in their commitment. So in these two verses that I have picked to translate today before you, some such believers are under discussion. The Almighty says, وَآخَرُونَ اعْتَرَفُوا بِذُنُوبِهِمْ. There are some other believers who admit their sins. khalatu amalan saliha. They mix good deeds wa akhara sayya with those that are bad. There are some good deeds that they do, and there are others which are bad that they commit. Asallahu an yatuba alayhim. It is very likely, it is hoped that God is going to accept their repentance and turn towards them in mercy. Inna Allah ghafur rahim. Indeed, God is forgiving, merciful. This is really a great hope that the Almighty has extended to the people who are weak in their faith, people who do good deeds, but they also do bad deeds. That's, I guess, is what our problem is as well. We sometimes do good deeds, but then we do sometimes things which are wrong. The Almighty has required these believers to go through a process. God says, Khuz min amwalihim sadaqatan. Addressing the Prophet, may God have mercy be on him, the Almighty is saying, take out from their wealth some sadaqah. They should spend in the way of God, do some charity work, to tahiruhum, you purify them, but to zakkihim biha, and do their tazkiyah through this process. That is, when there are sins that get collected in one's heart, then it's recommended, highly recommended, that one does good deeds to get rid of those sins and their ill effects. Here it is mentioned that they should spend in the way of God, and the Prophet, may God have mercy be on him, through this process should cause them to be purified and cause them to be enhanced and improved in their tazkiyah, in getting them to go at the higher levels of purification and excellence. And the Almighty goes on to say, Wasalli alayhim, and you, O Prophet, pray for them. Inna salataka sakanun lahum. Indeed, your prayer is going to cause them to be helped. Your prayer is going to be helpful for them. Uh, Wallahu Samiyun Alim, and God is all hearing, all knowing. That is, if you are, if you want your followers, companions to succeed in the next life, they will have to give up the ways that they have been following, the wrong deeds. They will need to repent, they will need to spend in the way of God and make a firm resolve to improve. And you, O Prophet, also pray for them when they will make an earnest attempt to improve, and you will help them by praying. Your prayer is going to be effective for them. This is exactly what is going to happen in the hereafter as well. On the one hand, there are going to be some believers who will do good deeds, and despite their bad deeds, they will make an earnest attempt to reform. And when there are going to be people who will come up with this kind of a worldly performance where bad deeds are attempted to be eliminated and washed away with good deeds, and the Prophet would come up with his prayers, which is his intercession, shafaat. The Almighty is going to accept his prayer if uh, the act of improvement and reformation undertaken by the individual is going to be pure and sincere. That was the first part. The second part of my today's presentation has to do with belief in God, discussion that we have been having for a few sessions. Uh, I mentioned the fact at the beginning of the presentation on belief in God that there are three sources of knowledge that we humans have, quite apart from the divine revelation, Wahi, which is a fourth source of knowledge. We have sense perception, we have intuitive understanding that we already have with us by birth a priori, and we have our intellect, which employs the information and data that is already there, either because of our sense perception or because of our intuitive understanding of certain things. Intellect analyzes that data and then makes conclusions. That's what the Almighty has done in the Quran to attract the attention of this intellect to look around the world that we are living in, to think and ponder, and to come to some logical conclusions. So, for example, the Quran tells us that if we look at the world that we are living in and we analyze what we see, we will quite naturally come to the conclusion that the world that we are living in has control, it has discipline. Uh, Things are happening in an organized manner. The day begins at a time which is very precisely, in minutest of its details, predictable. It is already anticipated. The sun travels the distance that it is supposed to travel the day, which is already predicted. But the heavenly bodies move around without creating any accidents, without being chaotic. The farmer sows the seed with absolute confidence that if water is to be provided and if there's going to be sunshine, the soil is most certainly going to bring out crops. There are so many laws of nature which are being followed diligently by the system that we are living in, and this whole system is functioning in a very neat, disciplined manner. So the Quran wants us to draw the conclusion that there is discipline in this world. This world is not chaotic, it's disciplined. The other conclusion that the Quran invites our attention to observe, to come to, is the fact that the discipline that we witness is not there necessarily for its own sake. It's not a display of might or an impressive presence of an unnecessary, unwanted, God knows why discipline. But it's a discipline which is absolutely essential for our survival, for my survival, your survival. I mean, I need water, and this world and the way it's functioning, it's providing water to me for me to quench my thirst. I need food, and food is available aplenty. The whole system is functioning in a manner, in a disciplined manner. The different elements of this existence, they come to interplay and cooperate with each other so that I am able to survive. I am able to be provided for what I need. The air that I breathe is the exact air that I need for my survival. The sun is not too close to my planet, for me to be burnt out, nor is it at a distance too far for me to freeze to death, and so on. So, what we have in this world is not just discipline, but providence. We are being provided for. The life that we are living is a life that we like, we love it. Uh, there could be a few exceptions, but in most cases, we don't want to die. Death is a tragedy, it's not accepted because life is brilliant. But what did we do to get this life? Nothing. It's a blessing that we have gotten without deserving, which really means that what we have around in this life is also what can be described as mercy, which is something over and above mere what you call justice, mere fairness. Justice demands that we get what we deserve. But here, what we are getting is not necessarily what we deserve only. We also have what we don't deserve, which is mercy. Then our attention is also pointed towards the fact um, that the world that we are living in has is running, functioning on the basis of planning. There is a plan. There is thinking. Uh, Intelligence, which you can see behind all that is happening. Um, for instance, there is a child that when it comes to this world, human child, it needs lots of attention. It's vulnerable. It has needs which she or he cannot meet on her his own. And in each case, when hundreds and thousands and millions of children come to this world, in each case, what we find is that even before they land on this planet, they already are on the verge of being welcomed. There are people who are eager to welcome them and to meet their needs. So there was a need that the child is to be taken care of, and there is a planning which ensures that the need is properly met. So the Quran says that when you look at this world around you with an open mind, without a biased mind, you will find discipline, you will find providence, you will find mercy, you will find wisdom, and much more in this world that you are part of. For every thinking, sensitive, honest mind, uh, there has to be an answer. There should be eagerness to get the answer. And the Quran tells us that the answer is Allah, the God, the creator of the heavens and the earth. So the Quran mentions in chapter 24, Surah An-Nur, verse 35, Allahu Nur Samawati wal Ard. God is the light of the heavens and the earth. That is, when you're living in this world and the kind of questions that you come to your mind when you use your intellect, you are thinking. Um, these are questions. There are puzzles. Why this discipline? Why this providence? Why this mercy? Why this wisdom? But the only answer that can satisfy you, the Quran says, is God. The understanding of God, Allah. So belief in God is the light of the heavens and the earth. We now come to the third segment, which is What methodology of rule is to be followed by Muslims when they get the opportunity to rule? I am raising this question as a part of the learning that we need to do in the modern times, relevant to the modern times. Not just because there are, you know, 50 plus Muslim states where the majority of the population is Muslim, but also because of the fact that there is a likely possibility in the eyes of some, in the opinion of some, there is a danger that some of the countries which are as yet not Muslim countries by the majority of their populations may sooner or later become Muslims. And that is what they apprehend, they fear, is going to be very troubling, very problematic. I think it is the duty of Muslims to come out and clarify for the sake of their religion, for the sake of the non-Muslims, probably more particularly for their own sake and the sake of their future and their future generations. We need to clarify that there is no need to be fearful. Islam requires its followers to follow what the Almighty expects from them, and Islam wants its followers to accept faith to begin with, willingly, voluntarily, and to practice it as best as one can. And nobody can be forced to convert, nor can be forced to follow the expectations of faith, except for what becomes the law. So obviously, in every country of the world, there are set of rules which we call the law, which are legislated by representatives of the people. Likewise is going to happen if there is going to be a state where Muslims are in the majority. They will try and make the environment of the whole place more congenial for being able to live as a good Muslim. So there are going to be mosques, which are already there in many countries where Muslims are still a minority. Uh, there are going to be restrictions on the manner certain evils are now manifest and open. But this process is not going to happen without consultation, without discussion and debate. The reason is that the Quran has very clearly stated, and I think we need to understand it and we need to clarify it to the rest of the mankind, that the Almighty requires, expects from its followers, whenever they have a system of governance, whenever they are dealing with matters that have got to do with the collectivity, with the entire population of a certain place, locality, it is binding on Muslims that they should decide on the basis of mutual consultation. Amruhum shura bainahum. Amruhum shura bainahum is a statement that the Almighty has mentioned in verse 38 of chapter 42. Surah Ash-Shura, chapter 42, verse 38 says that those people who responded to the call of God, in other words, believed in His message, they have certain traits. certain attributes. And what this verse has done is remarkable. It cannot go unnoticed. That you would find ordinarily in the Quran very often that the Almighty is mentioning that believers, good believers are the ones, those who really believe, who say their prayers regularly, and who pay zakat, who do almsgiving, help poor people. This is what you find in many passages of the Quran, that those who are good believers are the ones, aqamus salat, who establish prayers, wa atabu zakat, and they give zakat, alms, in charity. Sometimes the expression is allazina yuqimuna salat, those who establish prayers, wa mimma razaqnahum yunfiqun, and from what we have given them in sustenance, they spend. Which means the same. Zakat is compulsory spending, and spending voluntarily is also a part of the same scheme, same expectation. However, in this particular verse, verse 38 of Surah 42, the Almighty has mentioned His expectations from believers in a manner that saying prayers regularly comes first, and spending what the Almighty has given in sustenance comes third. And in between, in order to emphasize the point, the Almighty has inserted His expectations from believers. Amruhum shura bainahum. They are the ones whose decision is based on mutual consultation. So, if it is my personal matter, I will do what I think is right in religion. I will believe in what makes more sense to me, given the arguments. But when it comes to collective matters, I can just let people know what my opinion is. I must allow others to give their opinions. I must listen to their opinions with a mind. And finally, the decision that is going to get implemented is the decision of everyone. If all people belonging to a certain society are unanimous, then the decision is obvious. But if they are not unanimous, then the majority decision would prevail. That is what God is saying. The minority shall be allowed to continue to mention their understanding, give their arguments. They can influence people around them in the hope that sometime later, subsequently, the decision can be changed. This is the process that is to be followed in an Islamic society. Uh, Obviously, there are certain expectations of the Almighty. Yes, there is a law, Sharia, and obviously it has certain objectives. But it is not true that what a few people, a few Muslims understand as Islam shall be implemented by force upon the rest of the population. Uh, Whatever Muslims want to do in a society where they are in the majority, they will have to allow open discussion and debate to take place. They should allow people to be critical. And obviously, the process is to be based on mutual consultation. Modern day democracy is based on the same principle. It is not absolutely fault free, it has many weaknesses. Those weaknesses and flaws need to be removed, but by and large, the principle in a democratic setup is based on the same rule which the Quran has described in this verse, which is binding on Muslims to follow when it comes to the question of collective affairs. That amruhum shura bainahum, their decisions are based on mutual consultation. So that was my part of the presentation. Now it's over to you, Maratib sir.
Jazakallah, Dr. Saab. You are really punctual and in finishing the difficult and very complex topic in 10 minutes and 12 minutes. Jazakallah. Let's take the question answer. Although we have reduced our audience because of we start this session late, unfortunately, but still we have questions. Sister Rafia will ask the question, please.
Assalamualaikum, Dr. Sahab. Can you hear me?
Walaikum Assalam. Yes, I can.
Um, Dr. Khalid, what is the punishment for gays and lesbians in Islam? The Sultan of Brunei is implementing the Sharia in his country, which is stated to be stoning to death for gays and 40 lashes or 10 years for women. Is this in line with the instructions of the Quran? That's one question. And secondly, my second one is if you could kindly tell me in which surah is the Miraj, the journey the Prophet ﷺ undertook, in which surah is it written? Thank you.
As for the first question, uh, the Quran has clearly mentioned punishments, which we call hudud, in case of only 5 crimes. There is punishment for theft, there is punishment for fornication and adultery, there is punishment for false allegation, there is punishment for murder, and there is punishment for creating anarchy and chaos, mischief on earth. As far as the rest of the crimes are concerned, uh, the Almighty has left it at the discretion of the Muslims to decide as to what kind of punishment they would want to come up with, given what already God has already decided. So the punishments mentioned in the Quran are called hudud. These punishments are the ones which are the maximum punishments for the crimes that they have been desired to be imposed, inflicted. Uh, as far as the rest of the punishments are concerned, as I said, it is upon Muslims of later times to decide. And I've already mentioned the methodology that the decision has to be based on mutual consultation and it has to be based on either the complete agreement consensus of Muslims or the understanding of the majority. What the Sultan of Brunei has decided is the opinion of a few scholars. That opinion can be questioned by others, but it is based on a certain process of relating the decision with what is already there in the Quran. Some kind of an ijtihad is done, some kind of a qiyas and analogy is drawn. But because this ijtihad, this qiyas is done by humans, individuals, scholars, uh, obviously it can always be questioned, it can always be disputed. As far as the question of maraj or ascension to the heavens is concerned, well, there are 2 parts of the journey that are mentioned. One is the journey from Mecca, Masjid al-Haram, to Masjid al-Aqsa, to Palestine. That is mentioned in the first verse of Surah Bani Israel or Surah Isra, which is the 17th chapter of the Quran. And the second part has been indirectly alluded to. Well, not just the second part of the journey, but the entire journey, which includes the journey from Mecca to Jerusalem, and then the other one, which is described in more detail in Hadith literature, that has been mentioned indirectly uh, in the same chapter, Surah Bani Israel, in verse 60.
See, Dr. Khalid, just want to be clear that does the Quran mentions stoning to death for gays, or is this the decision of some scholars? And the punishment for lesbians, 10 years or 40 lashes? Any verse of the Quran says
That is,
this?
that is exactly what I answered right now, that there is no such mention in the Quran. It's the opinion of scholars which they have probably come to, arrived at, on the basis of what is mentioned about fornication and adultery. But there is no direct mention of punishments for lesbians and gays.
Dr. Sam, I have the live witness of gays, especially in UK. Um, in some time when I meet my some of the clients who are gay actually, and they have done the gay marriages, and when I go with them for some business activity, uh, it's very difficult to accept this reality when they are living as a husband and wife and both are male, and they put the photographs in their rooms as like a female and male in a normal life. We see the husband and wife marriage pictures. Uh, there are two things. One is being a Muslim, I felt extremely and uh, hate and a sense of pity on them that what they have done with themselves. And the second, my role is as a British resident or the British citizen. Being a British, I have to accept them. Even I cannot express my hate towards them. Even it's a contempt of court or probably it's against the law. If I will say any say, feel anger or show hate against lesbian or gays. So being a British Muslim, how we can cope this a very obvious reality. I mean, gays and lesbian are everywhere in our around us in UK, especially in London, where the society is very very liberal and open. And even we cannot talk about they are wrong because by law, by constitution, they have legitimacy to remain and live in public, uh, and obviously that uh, violate the sentiments of other community. I'm sure there are many committed Christians who do not want gay and lesbian exist or they should be in the society. Hindus, Muslim. So there is a significant amount of people who do not want them to be in society as open. Uh, how they should respond in the British or Western civilization where they are really, really a reality. Um, so it's quite problematic for us.
Right. You see, for one thing, this problem has been there in all societies. As a problem, it's there in our society as well. What has happened now in the Western society, which is alarming, is the fact that the problem, the moral issue that was unacceptable, and whenever it was done by two individuals, it would be done secretly in hiding. Somehow, they are now coming in the open and making announcements of it and striving to legitimize this act, which we know, we understand is an evil. Uh, that's what has happened in the Western society because of the fact that, on the one hand, they are not now influenced by religion and religious values, and on the other hand, they've gone to an extreme to emphasize the need of liberty, freedom, etc. Well, as Muslims, uh, we don't need to hate any individual. Pity, sympathy, fine. We will sympathize with such people because probably they have some problem in their uh, attitude, or maybe in the makeup, the way they have been created, that they have certain leanings, inclinations, which cause them to do what is wrong. Obviously, if a person steals habitually, not even realizing that what he's doing is wrong, stealing, committing theft is wrong. You can't condone it. But then obviously you also feel for the person who is doing it probably without even realizing it. So we will sympathize with the individual. We will condemn the evil in our hearts, which is the weakest part of faith, but nonetheless, faith it is. Uh, and we will talk about this matter wisely and intelligently. I'm surprised. I still don't believe that you can't even talk about it. Probably you can't insult them, which is fine. But we should find, as Muslims, believers, we should find ways and means of expressing ourselves intelligently and wisely. I think that's one thing that we Muslims must work very hard to improve. We are very good at condemning, we are very good at expressing our strong views against others, but we're not very good at conveying our point of view to others in a manner that, while we are not compromising on our principles, we are stating candidly, clearly what we think is right or what we think is wrong. We're criticizing it without causing the other's feelings to be harmed, to be hurted. So, we need to somehow develop, uh, create within us that ability, which we must do. But honestly, I still don't believe that it's possible that for a society like the British society, that it would not allow you to speak against gays. The understanding that to be a gay or to be a lesbian is wrong. I mean, I think there has to be a decent way of saying that. And why can't you say that I disagree with it? I mean, there are so many people who are allowed to disagree with Islam. Our Prophet are gone. Why? Because the freedom and liberty of expression is what they value. So why can the same principle, the same goal, value, not be allowed to those who might want to criticize a certain tendency? So I think if that's true, which I still am not comfortable that it could be possible that in the British society or Western society, you're not allowed to speak against it. But I am not surprised. I mean, of course, you have such a rubbish law that doesn't allow you to in some countries at least, to talk against Holocaust, to talk about the fact that it didn't happen, or that it probably exaggerated or whatever. If that is the case, then I think for a Muslim, what you need to do is to point out that there are contradictions in our system as far as freedom of expression is concerned. But we must continue to talk, we must continue to think, we must continue to convince people that what is evil, and no matter how much you speak to justify it or to legitimize it, it still would remain evil.
Right. Just my last quick question related to this issue is, and then there are a couple of questions from the audience. Uh, Dr. Saab, uh, I'm stepping forward in order to understand this issue of gays and lesbians in detail. Might we, as a religious people all over the world, uh, we are not understanding the needs of the gay person or lesbian ladies. Um, might be it is indeed um, potential or inclination of that wish a male may have, or a lady they have to 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 have a sex with other same person, same sex. What my point is, after 50 years, maybe we can justify that no, they are right, because by birth, by nature, to feel a sense being a gay is a correct. And obviously, if they are by birth and by beliefs and by uh, genetically they are gay, we cannot stop them. Let them live freely. Uh, like we accept the other reality, transgender people, or who are between male and female. Before we didn't know, now we are accepting their existence as well as a third sex. So don't we think we have done enough research work to show our unacceptance of these gays and lesbians? Our research about their being is quite enough to hate, or to condemn them at least.
Maratib Sahab, if 15 years down the lane we will accept it, well, we'll see it then. Right now, we are 15 years, behind. We are to accept what we think is acceptable, honestly think is acceptable today. Tomorrow, if there is a new reality that dawns upon us, we'll accept that reality. Today, as it appears to us, it seems as if it is an evil which cannot be justified. Sex outside the wedlock is not allowed. A man feels strongly inclined towards a lady living in his neighborhood who is not his wife, probably the wife of somebody else. It could probably be scientifically shown that his inclinations are so very strong that probably the person and the lady should be allowed to have sex. But then there is something called morality. That morality uh, requires that the individual should control some of his, her inclinations. I came to learn about a famous lady yesterday uh, in the film business who, in her autobiography, mentioned that she was in love with a man probably a producer, director, uh, and was strongly inclined towards him. But he was married, and I respected his family, and I respected the family of the lady, and I respected their relationship, and I stepped back. And all throughout her life, she remained a bachelor. I said, my head's off to you, madam. I really admire you. You know, that's the kind of battle that the Almighty would want every individual to fight. We are living in a world where we have our inclinations. Some of them are very strong, uh, and yet there is a moral law. We cannot violate it. I may fancy the car of my neighbor and feel that it's not going to be a huge problem, very difficult for me to take it away and just disappear. Why? Because I so strongly uh, desire that car. My car is not as good, but I'm not going to do it. Not just simply because the law is going to get hold of me, because it's not mine. So that's what this trial of this life is all about. So if there is going to be a change of heart within us, as you say, tomorrow, well, either we are going to get degenerated, God forbid, as Muslims, or we will have a certain religious argument from within the Quran, Sunnah, Hadith that is going to convince us that it's okay. Right now, it's not there. Right now, what I find is that the Quran condemns al-fawahish, extramarital sex. Right now, what I have is the stories of the people of Lut alayhi salam, which tells me that they were punished by the Almighty uh, because they rejected the messenger of God. And they rejected the messenger of God because they were indulged in a vice, in a sin, in a crime in the eyes of God. And that was the crime of gaze. Uh, this crime, this evil, caused their hearts to be twisted. They were tainted. And as a result, they could not see the truth of the message of God that was getting revealed on Lut alayhi salam. 15 years from now, what I'm saying is explained by some scholar, and we are made to be convinced that what we were thinking 15 years ago was not based on the right sound argument understanding. I don't know what it would be. I am responsible for what I honestly understand today. I am not going to change my views because of a certain possible change of heart that might take place tomorrow. So let's be honest, let's be open, let's look at the arguments with an open mind, but let's not change our views simply because there is a lot of pressure from the societies.
Right. Hopefully, very well said. Brother Numan Nasir, he is in the session. He has asked a question to you. Is there any solution provided by Islam for sexual desire of lesbian and gays?
Uh, you see, where I've mentioned about my views as yet about gays and lesbians, that there is one possibility that what they are actually experiencing is um, is something which is unnatural, uh, deviation from what normally human beings are, because either because of the peculiar environment they were brought up in. Sometimes if you are exposed to sex, unnatural sex, in your childhood, you get addicted, and then you start feeling that that's probably what you want. So, it's more likely that in childhood days, because it's less possible for a boy to be physically, in relationship with a girl because of the restrictions. So boys get, inclined towards boys to satisfy their desire. And this causes them to be addicted. Well, if that's the case, then obviously I'm sure that there are people, I've talked to some people who said that there are ways of trying to bring people back, to enable them to get out of this trap. There are also possibilities mentioned that there are certain drugs and certain medicines which can cause human body to react in a manner that men and women, their orientation of sex might change. So what I'm saying is that if these theories are correct, and if it's correct to assume that it's not something that they get by birth, then the areas from where this problem originates, those areas need to be addressed so that these problems they get minimized. Uh, the trouble with the movement of gayism, lesbianism, is that they are telling us to accept it as normal, and that this is something which is not wrong. Uh, it is as if people are saying to us that, please accept telling lies as okay, as normal. Uh, how can we do it? How can we justify, insist, if tomorrow, some new investigation, research, people come to the conclusion that's not a bad idea for brothers and sisters to have physical relationship, mother and son, father and daughter. Are we then again going to be open and to continue to sympathetically look at the whole issue to allow it to be absorbed, to be accommodated? Well, we'll see that this is something which really is a degeneration. It's something that is a departure from human nature. So you're talking about solution. Well, the solution is A, to admit that it's wrong. B, to fight it from inside. Uh, and to make sure that it's thwarted, it's rejected, and see if somebody does it, even then, because of the strong influence that the person has, because of his whatever inclination, desires, while he should say sorry to the God each time he or she does it, never make it known to anybody else, never make it public, and never ever try to justify it by making it a philosophy that this is also right. So what I think is that right now what is happening is that an evil is not just being committed, it's being committed without having any remorse. And not just that, it's being attempted to be introduced in the society as an acceptable act and arrangement. And those who are thinking against it are being stopped from speaking against it, which I think is going too far. But as a Muslim, I would still say, let's not be unreasonable, let's not be impolite, let's be sympathetic, and let's continue this dialogue.
Our one of brother who is in the session already, brother Beg, he has a question: what is nasikh and what is mansukh? Nasikh and mansukh.
Nasikh and Mansukh, brother Baig, is an expression used for certain verses about which it is said that they have abrogated certain other verses. By abrogation, what it means is nullify, mansukh karna. There was an injunction, there was a hukum that was required to be followed, but then came another injunction, expectation that abrogated, nullified, took away the first injunction and replaced it by this one, the new one. That's abrogation. Uh, in the Quran, you find a few verses which were given by the Almighty to begin with, but they were later replaced by others. Why? Because God wanted his rules, his Sharia, his law to be implemented gradually. Why? Because he didn't want people to change overnight when their nature was not as yet prepared for it. Because he knows that it's human nature that there are some evils and problems which can only be given up gradually. Uh, Consuming intoxicating drinks is one example. Uh, People drink alcohol and they become habitual. In order for them to leave it, it's very difficult except for very strong people who have strong willpower to leave alcohol overnight. So the Almighty did not condemn it to be completely eliminated right from the word go. So to begin with, the Almighty just mentioned that it's bad. Then he went on to say that don't come close to prayers uh, in a state that you are drunk. And then finally, after a few years, he declared that it's absolutely unacceptable and just leave it. So this final verse or verses, they abrogated the earlier ones. But they're still there for us to know that whenever we have to implement Islamic expectations on an individual or a society, it should be done in a gradual manner, not in a harsh, uh, strict, immediate manner to be done overnight as some people expect. So it is still there.
Right, Jazakallah. Brother Farooq, but he has a question. Actually, he has typed in the question panel as well, but if he wants to speak directly to the teacher, Brother Farooq, you can unmute your mic and ask the question.
Assalamu alaikum. Dr. Sabah, just on this topic, um, as I heard you and read on other places, um, is being a gay, is that a normal thing or abnormal thing? First question. Are we supposed to hate gay people? So that's my second question. And third question is, according to religion, is this a sin or a crime which one could be punished? Thank you.
Before I answer your three questions, I'm sure that there is a reason for it. But you know, whenever somebody as close a brother as Ahmed Farooq Butt leaves your group, WhatsApp group, you feel a little, you feel bad about it. I'm sure there is a reason for it. I saw your name exiting my group, and I was wondering why. Probably you've changed your number. Uh, to be a gay is abnormal. It's not normal, in my understanding. As Brother Maratib said, maybe 15 years later, if we are alive, some significant transformation takes place. I don't know about it, but it's not, obviously, it's not normal. Simply because of the fact, quite apart from many other reasons, let's let's admit that the instinct of inclination of sex that we have within us, if you look at life philosophically and the way God manages to run this world, as I mentioned earlier in my explanation of wisdom, everything that is given has a purpose. This instinct of sex has a purpose, which is reproduction. And whether gays or lesbians, what they do is only, gratification of a desire without ever having a possibility of reproduction. So clearly, from the scheme of things of the Almighty, this arrangement is not natural, not normal, it's abnormal. Are we supposed to hate them? No. I think I will buy their claim that they are helpless. Uh, I cannot I cannot assume that they're wrong. I mean, they have to be right because if you are talking about a man who says that no woman attracts me, and you can see that the chap has no interest in women as far as having a relationship, physical relationship is concerned, and he says that I'm attracted towards men. He has to be right. So, if that's the case, then obviously, if the person is truthful and there is every reason to believe that what he's saying is right, uh, then how can you hate the person? What we are trying to say is that this abnormality, this problem that the person is going through, is not acceptable in the moral scheme of things of this world, the way our Creator has designed this world. So, if somebody is forced to do it because of his weaknesses, her weaknesses, keep it to yourself. Try to get out of it. Don't talk about it. Don't justify it. Try to go for the cure of it. Uh, is it a sin or a crime? Well, it would remain a sin so long as it's not declared a crime. It depends on which society you live in. In your society, it's just sin from my point of view. But if the information about Brunei is correct, then it's a crime as well. Like, most Western societies would believe now that adultery, fornication is a sin, not a crime. But if we have a state, Islamic state, where we legislate that whoever is caught having extramarital sex is going to be punished, then obviously it's going to become a crime as well.
Dr. Khalid, can I say something, please? What about
These
the
are,
gays and gays
Ratib,
and what about the gays and lesbians in Muslim societies? I know of a very noble woman personally who's very religious, says her prayers, is very, very a good person, and yet she is a lesbian. Now, I understand what you are saying, but I would I know the person personally, so it bothers me that we can't understand that some person could have been born that way, and they can't get out of it.
Maratib Sahib, it's not the way you normally operate this session. Should I answer it?
Yes, please. Actually, Sister Rafia's mic was unmute, so she She has answer questions you. Yeah, yeah, that's fine. If you can answer, please.
Okay. You see, I'm sure there is a reason why all of you are talking about gays and lesbians today. Maybe you might have had a breakfast with them. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that what we are saying is, you see, it is quite possible that you have an absolutely noble person, but he is doing something in one part of his life that is not noble. So we are not angels. Uh, let's not start investigating the private lives of each other. You might get shocked. What a person does in the private is his her business. We pray for each other. We try to reform ourselves. We fight against evil. This world is a trial, and it's a trial where good and evil are at odds with each other all the time. What I am trying to emphasize over and over again is that gayism, lesbianism, what it what it means, what happens when they go through their respective inclinations, is unacceptable in the eyes of religion, in the eyes of God. What you are asking me, the lady that you are asking me about, what surprises and disappoints me is that you know that she's a lesbian. I mean, if a lady has sex with another lady, it should be something, if at all it happens, in secret. How did it become public? Why did it become public? You might say that she is very close to another lady and they keep hanging around with each other all the time. So what? I mean, I have friends. I mean, if I am close to another man, uh, why would anybody accuse me of being a gay? Unless I am, well, allow me to use this word, I am stupid enough to tell others that, you know what, the man that I hang around with, I have sex with him. That's, to me, that's the dirty part of this whole affair. Otherwise, I mean, okay, there are people who have certain weaknesses, even though they are noble. But the trouble, the problem, the difficulty that this movement has created for us is that they want us to make something appear good and acceptable, which is not good and acceptable. Full stop.
Yeah, right. Actually, that is very complex and very detailed topic as well. A lot of people want to share or want to question uh, because of because these type of issues we don't discuss in public, or it or they do not print in the print media as well. So that's why probably in our session the people are more tend to discuss about this issue, especially the Brunei uh, implementation of Sharia issue is also in the mainstream of Western media. So that's why people are discussing it. Uh, I, I think we can conclude this session here. It's already probably 15 minutes over. Uh, I'm really thankful to all audience for sharing their experiences and ask very good questions. And I'm really obliged and grateful to Dr. Khalid Zaheer for conducting this session very successfully. Inshallah, we will meet again after 2 weeks in the same time, 9 a.m. UK time with Dr. Khalid Zaheer. Jazakallah everyone.
And please,
Assalamu alaikum.
please remind me a day before that it's my 1 p.m. Thank you.
Yeah, it is Pakistani time, 1 p.m. and here in UK is 9
Right.
a.m. local time, British Standard Time. We don't follow GMT. People also have confused that it's 8 GMT or 10 GMT. We follow British Standard Time, BST. So 9 o'clock BST, we will on the air after 2 weeks, inshallah. Jazakallah.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi
Walaikum salam.